This is the MMA Brief Podcast, recapping the world of mixed martial arts every single week, with your host, Brandon Johansson.
Welcome back to the MMA Brief Podcast, recapping the fights from this past weekend. UFC Fight Night 98, Rafael dos Anjos versus Tony El Cucuy Ferguson in Mexico City. It was a great fight, which saw Tony Ferguson win his 9th straight lightweight bout, a streak unparalleled right now in that division, and should set him up to be the obvious contender in that division, whoever wins between Conor McGregor or Eddie Alvarez this week, UFC 205. There was some controversy after the fight, none during it. Rafael dos Anjos did suffer a nasty eye poke in the second round. Now, I was online today. One thing that struck me about that is after the decision was read and Tony Ferguson was the winner, they talked to Rafael dos Anjos, and he said that the eye poke really damaged him. But he pointed to the wrong eye. He pointed to the eye that had been beaten up with jabs and strikes. So I took not offense to it, but I called bullshit on it. I said, you don't even remember which eye had a finger lodged in it? You're pointing at the wrong eye. Some people online did not take kindly to that, started arguing with me. You know, if you read the article, he said there was multiple eye pokes. Listen, there wasn't multiple eye pokes. It was one eye poke, and it wasn't the eye that he was contending it was at the end of the fight. Someone else said, if you had watched the fight, then you would have seen that he got poked in both eyes. And I will admit there was a glance on his left eye, but that left eye was already damaged from strikes. The finger went into the left eye. He points to the right eye after the fight and says, I would have been fine if I could see out of this eye. Yeah, you got punched in it a lot. I'm not saying that the eye poke didn't happen. I just don't think it really had any major factor in the outcome of the fight. El Cucuy looks great. He's rolling, hopefully on his way to a title shot. Diego Sanchez picked up a huge win against former Bellator fighter Marcin Held, leg lock specialist. Diego did some stuff like shaved his legs and got a pedicure in anticipation for his leg locks. He did a pretty good job staying out of leg locks, but there was a tight standing guillotine at one point, and Diego pulled off a move I'd never seen. It was they're calling it the Showtime guillotine escape. He just launched both of his feet off the cage and spun him around until he wasn't holding on to him anymore. It was a thing of beauty, and just one of those things that they don't teach you in the gym, but now is going to be taught in the gym. I think it was spur of the moment. It could potentially now be trained for. You get a guy, you're in a standing guillotine, use the cage to your advantage, push off. It's risky, but Diego's the riskiest fighter I think we've ever seen. So it was nice to see him pick up a decision win in the co-main event. Phil Davis, the day prior, on Friday, Bellator's event, was able to defeat the previously undefeated Liam McGeary for the 205-pound light heavyweight title. Before the fight, Phil Davis said something rather interesting to my ears. He said that he's the best light heavyweight in Bellator. That's probably true, obviously, but it was interesting to me that he didn't say in the whole world, because he knows that he's not the best light heavyweight in the world. That's why I went to Bellator. So congratulations to him for winning the 205-pound title of Bellator. Hopefully he can defend it many, many times, as he is the best light heavyweight in their division. Tough test for Liam McGeary, who looked sensational before this in every single one of his fights, until he fought, a next-level guy like Phil Davis with his wrestling pedigree. Before Liam McGeary looked really good off his back, he really didn't offer up much. And you also have to consider that Phil Davis is great when it comes to not only offensive wrestling, but he's very good at submissions. He's good at offensive and defensive submissions, so nothing really clicked for Liam McGeary. He was grounded and pounded and dominated. So hopefully he can bounce back, and we'll see where it goes from there. Same night, Sergey Kharitonov was KO'd in 16 seconds of the first round. Never heard of the guy he fought, but Sergey Kharitonov I have heard of. He holds knockout wins over Andrei Arlovsky, Alistair Overeem, Pedro Hizzo, Sammy Schilt, Murillo Ninja Hua, and he also has a decision win over Fabricio Verdum. So it was pretty surprising to see him get knocked stiff in 16 seconds in his Bellator debut. He apparently has already booked his next fight for early December, less than a month after getting knocked stiff, so that's in Russia where, you don't have medical suspensions, I guess. Jon Jones' suspension for his failed test back at UFC 200 has resulted in a 1-year retroactive suspension, meaning he'll be able and eligible to fight July 7th of 2017. In the meanwhile, he has signed up to fight Dan Henderson in a submission-only grappling event at Chael Sonnen's promotion, Submission Underground 2. Very interesting because UFC had a pay-per-view. Jon Jones was supposed to fight Dan Henderson a couple years ago. An injury forced Henderson out of the bout. Now Jon Jones not eligible to compete in MMA. He's going to take on the retired Dan Henderson in a submission grappling event. I do not like this event for Henderson, but I do think that it'll sell a lot of tickets, and I'm definitely going to tune in. Also, Miesha Tate versus Jessica Eye is booked for that grappling event as well. They fought once in the UFC. Now they're going to grapple. One more thing here. The Pro Fighters Association has a list of goals that they're trying to get out there. And I'll just read through these goals. There's a list of 10. So the first one is a minimum of $25,000 to show, $25,000 to win in any organization. That's a significant bump up in comparison to what fighters and other organizations, and even in the UFC, are getting entry-level paid. The next would be health care for fighters and their family. That'd be a significant increase in what the fighters have. They only have liability insurance right now, so if they did get injured, there'd be a huge deductible. So this would be a more comprehensive insurance plan for their families as well. Number 3, experience-based pension plans for fighters over 65. 20 Octagon appearances, $75,000 for the rest of your life. 30 Octagon appearances, $150,000 for the rest of your life. And if you make it to the UFC Hall of Fame, you get an additional $100,000 a year. Interesting plan. Number 4 would be a mutually agreed upon drug testing system. The USADA drug testing system right now is very invasive. Fighters don't like it. And then the UFC is the only one really doing that. So this would be across the board, all organizations have a mutually agreed upon testing system. Number 5 would be independent arbitrators for promoter and fighter disputes. Number 6, better shared revenue. TV, ticket sales, pay-per-view, merchandise. As it stands right now, the top UFC fighters get pay-per-view share and 10% of merchandise. This would be a more well-rounded plan for every fighter. Number 7, agreed upon weight classes. Number 8, better fighter rankings. So you would have, in their scenario, the possibility of cross-promotion fights. If the number 2 and the number 1 are literally accepted across the board, they should fight, no matter what the fighting promotion is, how I see it. Number 9 would be a fighter board that evaluates officials, judges, and referees. And number 10 would be a rehab allowance of $2,000 a month for fighters who are injured and unable to compete. So those are their 10 goals right off the bat. I think most of what they're doing is noble. I don't know how far they'll get, but they might have to bend on a few of these things. right off the bat, just looking at it, $25,000 per fighter per fight seems pretty expensive. When you hear Dana White explain things like, listen, this is a show that was free on FS1, and we did it in an arena with 6,000 seats, and the gate was only 150,000. How are you going to pay every fighter $25K? To me, it's utopian. It's definitely got the right intentions behind it. I just don't know how far it's going to go. So I'll leave you in anticipation for next week, UFC 205, the biggest event in UFC history, coming live from New York, Madison Square Garden, 3 title fights. It's going to be insane. Come back next week. We'll talk all about it. Peace.